Welcome to Briefly, where we take life changing books and bring them to you in their purest essence, simple, powerful, and ready to inspire action. I'm Vikram, your Briefler, and today we're diving into a book that has transformed millions of lives around the world, Atomic Habits by James Clear. We often search for dramatic turning points, that one big decision, that one lucky break, that single bold move that will change everything. But in reality, our lives are rarely shaped by grand events. More often, they're shaped by the small, invisible choices we make every single day. Do we go for a quick scroll through social media, or do we read a few pages of a book? Do we skip the gym today, or do we show up, even if just for 10 minutes? These choices seem trivial, but over time, they compound into the story of our lives. And that's exactly what Atomic Habits is about. But before we dive into the book, let me tell you about its author, James Clear. James wasn't always a best selling writer or a global expert on habits. His journey began in high school, where he suffered a terrible accident. A baseball bat struck him in the face, leaving him with severe injuries. He went through months of painful recovery, relearning even the simplest movements. Most people would have given up on their dreams, but James used that time to slowly, patiently rebuild his life. Step by step, small improvement after small improvement, he not only regained his strength but went on to excel in academics and athletics. That recovery taught him something powerful. Massive transformation doesn't come from overnight miracles, it comes from small habits consistently repeated. Over the years, James studied the science of behavior, human psychology, and performance. What he discovered was a universal truth: if you can master your habits, you can master your life. Now, why does this book matter to you? Because whether you realize it or not, your habits are writing your future. Every small decision, what you eat, how you spend your time, what thoughts you entertain, is like a vote for the kind of person you're becoming. You don't need to wait for motivation or hope for discipline. You just need to focus on tiny atomic changes. And the beauty is, once those habits compound, they can transform not just your days, but your entire destiny. In Atomic Habits, James Clear breaks down this process into simple, practical steps. He shows us how to build good habits, break bad ones, and design an environment that makes change effortless. And don't worry, this isn't about willpower or perfection. It's about small wins that stack up slowly but surely into extraordinary results. Think about it this way: if you improve just 1% every day, it might feel like nothing at first, but after a year, that tiny daily growth compounds into a 37 times improvement. Imagine the difference that could make in your career, your health, your relationships, your entire identity. That's the power of small habits, and that's why this book is so life changing. So, in this briefly journey, we'll walk together through the key ideas of atomic habits. We'll learn how habits are formed, why they stick, and how you can redesign your routines to work for you instead of against you. More importantly, we'll discover how small changes, when sustained, can help you become the person you've always wanted to be. Remember, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And by mastering small, atomic habits, you can finally create systems that lead to lasting success. This is more than a book summary, it's an invitation to stop chasing overnight transformations and instead start building the kind of habits that quietly but surely shape your future. So, let's get started. In chapter 1, we'll uncover the surprising truth about the hidden power of habits and why the smallest changes often create the biggest impact. In the last chapter, we uncovered the idea that it's often the smallest, invisible choices that shape our destiny, and that's where James Clear's big promise begins. Small habits, when repeated over time, hold the power to create extraordinary results. Let's dive into this first lesson: the power of atomic habits. Think for a moment about money sitting in a bank account. At first, the interest seems tiny, a few rupees, maybe a few cents. It's hardly noticeable. But let that money sit for months, then years, and the growth compounds. Suddenly, the once small account has multiplied. Habits work in exactly the same way. One healthy meal won't transform your body. One evening of reading won't make you wise. But repeated again and again, these small actions compound just like interest, building a future far greater than you imagined. The tricky part is that change feels invisible at the beginning. Imagine going to the gym for a week. You push yourself, sweat, and even wake up sore. But when you look in the mirror, nothing much seems different. That's when most people quit. They think, what's the point? It's not working. But the truth is, results lag behind efforts. Just like ice doesn't melt at 31 degrees, but suddenly turns to water at 32, our habits build quietly under the surface until one day the breakthrough comes. Now, here's the mistake many of us make: we obsess over goals. We set targets like, I want to lose 10 kilos, or I want to make $1 million, or I want to run a marathon. Goals are inspiring, but James Clear reminds us of something powerful. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. Think about it. Both the winner and the loser had the same goal: to win the match. Both students aimed to get good grades. Both businesses wanted to succeed. Goals don't separate success from failure. It's the systems, the daily routines, the small habits that make the difference. Let me give you a simple example. Imagine two writers. Both dream of writing a best-selling novel. One sits around waiting for inspiration to strike. The other has a system: write 500 words every morning, no matter what. After a year, the first writer has a blank page. The second has over 180,000 words, enough for not one but two books. The difference wasn't talent, it was habits. Now, you might be wondering, does this actually work in real life? The answer is a resounding yes. Let's look at a couple of real world examples. Take the story of Dave Brailsford, the coach of the British cycling team. For years, they were stuck in mediocrity, but Brailsford introduced a philosophy called the aggregation of marginal gains, improving everything by just 1%. He focused on tiny details: better bike seats, cleaner tires, improved sleep for athletes, even teaching riders the best way to wash their hands to avoid colds. These changes seemed insignificant on their own, but together they transformed the team. Within a decade, British cyclists dominated the Olympics and the Tour de France, achieving results once thought impossible. Or think about an everyday example: learning a language. If you study for an hour once a month, you'll barely make progress. But if you practice just 10 minutes a day, those minutes add up. Before you know it, you're holding conversations, surprising yourself with how fluent you've become. It wasn't a giant leap, it was small steps consistently taken. Here's a reflective question for you. What's one area of your life that you've been trying to change with big goals but haven't made progress? Now imagine shifting focus away from the outcome and instead building a small system that makes progress inevitable. What habit could you commit to, not for a week but for months, maybe years? Because here's the truth: goals are about the results you want to achieve, systems are about the processes that lead to those results. And when you fall in love with the process, success takes care of itself. James Clear puts it beautifully: success is not a finish line to cross, it's a system to improve. Think about that for a moment. Success isn't about reaching a final destination. It's about living inside the right routines every single day. So, the power of atomic habits lies in two things. First, their compounding effect over time, and second, their ability to shift focus from outcomes to systems. Small habits might not feel powerful today, but just like seeds planted in the ground, they eventually grow into towering trees. The challenge, of course, is patience. Can you trust the process when results aren't visible yet? Can you keep watering the seed when nothing seems to be sprouting? That's the test of habit. The ones who endure the invisible early stages are the ones who reap extraordinary rewards later. And that brings us to the next step in our journey. We've seen the power of small habits, but how exactly do they work? Why do some habits stick effortlessly while others fade away, no matter how much willpower we throw at them? In Chapter 2, we'll peel back the curtain and explore the science of habit formation and learn why understanding the habit loop is the key to lasting change. Welcome to Chapter 2, the 4 laws of behavior change. At its heart, every habit follows a simple cycle. Think of it like a loop with 4 stages: cue, craving, response, and reward. This loop runs quietly in the background of your life, shaping your behaviors whether you realize it or not. Let me paint a picture. Imagine you're walking into your kitchen and you see a plate of cookies sitting on the counter. That's the cue, a trigger that captures your attention. Immediately, a craving sparks, the thought of biting into something warm and sweet. The next step is the response. You reach out, take a cookie and eat it. Finally comes the reward, a burst of sugary pleasure that tells your brain, this felt good. Let's do it again next time. Now here's the fascinating part. Every time you go through this cycle, your brain learns. It links the cue with the reward, and before long, the sight of cookies isn't just neutral, it's irresistible. That's how habits, good or bad, are born. James Clear simplifies this into 4 practical laws of behavior change. The first one is make it obvious, second one is make it attractive, third one is make it easy, and fourth one is make it satisfying. If you want to build a good habit, follow these laws. If you want to break a bad one, invert them, make it invisible, unattractive, difficult and unsatisfying. Let's explore this with real life examples. Take exercise. Most people say, I'll work out when I feel motivated. But motivation is unreliable. Instead, design your environment to make the cue obvious. For instance, lay out your workout clothes the night before. Put your running shoes by the door. Suddenly, the moment you wake up, the cue is staring you in the face. Or think about the reverse, breaking a bad habit. If you want to stop mindless scrolling on your phone, don't just rely on self-control. Make the cue invisible. Keep your phone in another room when you work. Disable notifications. Out of sight, out of mind. Habits thrive on cues, so the best way to weaken a bad habit is to remove its triggers. But cues alone aren't enough. Habits also depend on craving, the emotional pull that makes us act. Imagine brushing your teeth. As kids, most of us hated it, but toothpaste companies added mint flavor, turning brushing into a refreshing experience. Suddenly, it wasn't just about hygiene, it was about the craving for that cool, clean feeling. That's the second law, make habits attractive. Then comes the third law, make it easy. Too often, we set goals that are too ambitious. We tell ourselves, I'll read for an hour every day, but when life gets busy, that promise feels overwhelming. Instead, shrink the habit. Start with just 2 pages. If you want to meditate, start with 2 minutes. The smaller the action, the easier it is to stick with. Remember, it's not about intensity, it's about consistency. Once a habit is established, it grows naturally. Finally, the fourth law, make it satisfying. Our brains are wired to repeat what feels good. If a habit gives you a sense of accomplishment, you'll want to do it again. That's why tracking progress works so well. Imagine checking off each day you practice guitar or each workout you complete. That tiny reward, seeing the streak grow, motivates you to keep going. But here's where things get even deeper. Habits aren't just about actions, they're about identity. James Clear says it best, every action you take is a vote for the type of person you want to become. Think about that for a moment. When you go for a run, you're not just burning calories, you're casting a vote for being an athlete. When you sit down to write, you're not just putting words on a page, you'll be becoming a writer. This is why small habits matter so much. Every time you choose to act, you're shaping your identity, one vote at a time. And the more votes you cast, the stronger that identity becomes. So instead of saying, I want to run a marathon, say, I am a runner. Instead of saying, I want to learn guitar, say, I am a musician. Goals set the direction, but identity-based habits keep you moving. Once your habits align with who you believe you are, change becomes effortless. Now I want you to pause and reflect. What identity are you voting for with your daily actions? Are your habits shaping you into the person you want to become, or are they dragging you away from it? The beauty of the 4 laws of behavior change is that they give you control. By mastering cues, cravings, responses, and rewards, you can design habits that fit the identity you want to live by. So, in chapter 2, we've seen that habits are not random, they follow a predictable loop. Understand the loop, and you hold the blueprint to change. Apply the 4 laws, and you can create habits that stick while breaking the ones that don't serve you. But there's still a missing piece. We know how habits form, but how do we make them so small, so frictionless, that we can't help but succeed? In the next chapter, we'll explore the power of starting tiny and why the 2-minute rule might be the secret weapon you've been waiting for. Welcome to chapter 30, Make It Obvious. The very first law of behavior change is simple yet profound, make your habits obvious. Why? Because what we don't see, we often don't act on. Think about it. How many times have you opened the fridge, spotted a slice of cake, and eaten it, even though you weren't hungry? And how many times have you forgotten the apples in the back corner, letting them rot? That's not because you love cake more than apples, it's because the cake was obvious and the apples were invisible. Visibility shapes behavior. James Clear suggests starting with awareness. You can't change what you don't notice. One powerful tool is called the habit scorecard. It's a simple exercise. Write down all the things you do in a day from the moment you wake up. I check my phone, I brush my teeth, I make coffee, I scroll social media. Then look at each habit and ask, does this serve me or not? It's eye opening. Often we think we are in control of our habits, but in truth, our habits control us. The scorecard works like a mirror. It doesn't judge, it just reflects. Once you see your routines clearly, you can decide which ones to keep, which ones to adjust, and which ones to replace. But awareness alone isn't enough. The real magic comes from environment design. Your environment is like an invisible hand guiding your choices. If you want to eat healthier, don't just try harder. Redesign your kitchen. Put a bowl of fresh fruit on the table and tuck the junk food away in the cupboard. Suddenly, the good habit becomes the obvious one. Want to read more? Don't rely on motivation. Place a book on your pillow in the morning so when you go to bed at night, it's the first thing you see. Want to start exercising? Lay out your workout clothes beside your bed. That way, when you wake up, the decision is already made for you. It might sound almost too simple, but this works because of how our brains are wired. Humans are visual creatures. We're drawn to what's in front of our eyes. By shaping the cues around us, we can nudge ourselves toward better behaviors without relying on willpower. Here's a story to bring this to life. In one hospital cafeteria, researchers wanted to see if they could get people to drink more water instead of soda. They didn't ban soda, they didn't lecture people, they didn't add motivational posters. All they did was make water bottles more visible. They placed them at eye level in every cooler and on every counter. In just 3 months, sales of water went up by 25% and soda sales dropped. No speeches, no rules, just environment design. The same principle works in reverse too. If you want to break a bad habit, make it invisible. Trying to watch less TV, take the batteries out of the remote and put them in a drawer. Want to cut down on junk food? Don't buy it in the first place. You can't eat what isn't in the house. Here's a reflective question: what habits in your life are failing simply because the cues are invisible? And what bad habits are thriving only because their triggers are too obvious? Remember, small tweaks to your environment can create massive shifts in your behavior. You don't need to fight with willpower if the path is already laid out for you. Let's recap the essence of this law. Notice your current habits through awareness. Use habit scorecards to identify what's helping and what's harming. Design your environment so that good habits are obvious and bad habits are hidden. At first, these steps may feel minor, but think back to the compounding power we discussed in earlier chapters. Over weeks and months, these tiny adjustments reshape your routines, your choices, and ultimately your identity. So, the first law of behavior change teaches us this: if you want to change your life, don't just focus on discipline or motivation. Focus on what's visible. Make the cues for good habits so clear that they're impossible to ignore. But visibility alone isn't enough. A habit may be obvious, but if it's not appealing, you won't stick to it. That's why the second law is all about desire. In chapter 40, Make It Attractive, where law 2 will uncover how to harness the power of cravings and why making your habits appealing is the secret to keeping them alive. In our last chapter, we learned the importance of making habits obvious. We saw how awareness and environment design can set us up for success by placing the right cues directly in front of us. But visibility alone isn't enough. After all, you might see a bowl of fruit every day, yet still reach for the bag of chips. Why? Because one feels tempting while the other feels like a chore. That's where the second law of behavior change comes in. Welcome to chapter 40, Make It Attractive. The truth is, simple habits that stick are the ones we actually enjoy. If a habit feels dull or punishing, chances are we'll abandon it. But if it feels rewarding, exciting, or even fun, our brains will crave it again and again. Let's talk about what's happening inside us. At the core of attraction is a powerful chemical called dopamine. Most people think dopamine is the pleasure molecule, but here's the fascinating part: dopamine isn't just released when we experience pleasure, it spikes beforehand, when we anticipate it. That's why the smell of coffee in the morning feels so good even before the first sip. That's why the buzz of a notification makes us instantly curious even before we see the message. Our brains are constantly scanning for cues that signal rewards. If we want to build lasting habits, we need to harness this wiring instead of fighting against it. So, how do we make good habits attractive? One clever strategy James Clear introduces is called temptation bundling. This is the art of pairing something you need to do with something you love to do. By linking them together, you trick your brain into craving the useful habit. Here's a simple example. Imagine you want to exercise more, but you also love watching your favorite TV series. With temptation bundling, you only allow yourself to watch that series while on the treadmill or bike. Suddenly, your brain starts to look forward to the workout because it's paired with entertainment you enjoy. Another example, let's say you're trying to build a habit of reading more. You could pair it with your morning cup of coffee. Instead of scrolling on your phone while sipping, make it a ritual: coffee plus 10 minutes of reading. Over time, the warm smell of coffee itself becomes a cue, drawing you into the habit. The beauty of temptation bundling is that it transforms discipline into desire. You're no longer forcing yourself to do something, you're actually looking forward to it. Think about how this principle already shows up in your life. Gyms play upbeat music because it makes the effort feel lighter. Children's toothpaste is flavored like bubblegum so kids actually want to brush their teeth. Even workplaces add coffee breaks not just for caffeine, but because a small pleasure makes hard work more bearable. Here's a story that captures this perfectly. A group of researchers studied people who wanted to build an exercise habit. They found that the most consistent exercisers weren't necessarily the most disciplined or the most motivated. Instead, they were the ones who actually enjoyed their form of exercise. Some loved running outdoors, some loved dancing, others loved lifting weights. The activity itself became attractive. The lesson? Don't force yourself into a habit that feels like torture. Find a version of it that brings you joy. Now pause and ask yourself, what habits have you been struggling to build simply because they don't feel attractive? Could you reframe them, redesign them, or pair them with pleasures you already love? Remember, every habit is a vote for the person you want to become. If you want to vote consistently, you need to make casting that vote enjoyable. The second law reminds us pleasure is not the enemy of discipline. In fact, it's the fuel that keeps habits alive. Let's bring it all together. To make a habit stick, you need more than willpower. You need anticipation, you need attraction. By harnessing dopamine, by designing rituals you actually look forward to, and by practicing strategies like temptation bundling, you can turn good habits from obligations into cravings. So, if the first law, make it obvious, sets the stage, the second law, make it attractive, lights it up. Once a habit is both visible and desirable, you've already cleared half the battle. But what about the third piece of the puzzle? Even when a habit is obvious and attractive, it can still fail if it feels difficult or overwhelming. That's why the third law of behavior change is so crucial. The next chapter is about the third law, make it easy. In that chapter, we'll explore how to strip away friction, lower the barriers, and apply the magic of small wins. In our last chapter, we discovered that habits survive when they're attractive. We learned how dopamine fuels anticipation, how pleasure can power discipline, and how strategies like temptation bundling can turn boring tasks into cravings. But there's still a challenge left. Even if a habit is obvious and attractive, if it feels hard to do, we'll find a way to avoid it. That's where the third law of behavior change steps in. Welcome to chapter 5b, make it easy. Here's the truth: friction decides whether a habit survives or dies. The harder something feels, the less likely we are to do it. The easier it feels, the more natural it becomes. Think about water. It always flows toward the path of least resistance. Human behavior works the same way. Imagine two people trying to eat healthier. One stocks their fridge with fresh fruits and pre-cut vegetables. The other keeps chips and cookies on the counter, while the apples are buried deep in the drawer. Who do you think will eat better? The first person doesn't need more discipline, they simply made the healthy choice easier. James Clear gives us a simple but powerful idea here: reduce the friction for good habits and increase the friction for bad ones. Want to watch less TV? Unplug it and put the remote in another room. Want to play more guitar? Keep the guitar on a stand in the living room, not in a case under the bed. But the real game changer in this law is something called the 2-minute rule. The idea is this: when you start a new habit, make it so small that it takes less than 2 minutes to do. Why? Because starting is often the hardest part. Let's say you want to build a reading habit. Don't begin with a goal of read 50 books this year. Begin with open a book and read one page. That's it. Want to run regularly? Don't set out to run 5 kilometers. Just put on your running shoes. Most of the time, once you start, you'll do more. But even if you don't, you've cast a vote for the identity you want to build. A reader, a runner, a creator. Think about it like this: the 2-minute rule lowers the mental barrier so much that resistance has nowhere to hide. It tricks your brain into saying, "This is easy, I can do this." And once you're in motion, momentum carries you forward. Here's a story that brings this to life. A man who wanted to get fit made a deal with himself. He would go to the gym every day, but only for 5 minutes. That's right, he wasn't allowed to stay longer. At first, people thought he was crazy. But here's what happened. By showing up daily, he built the identity of, "I'm the kind of person who doesn't skip the gym." After a few weeks, the habit of showing up was automatic, and soon, staying longer became natural. The 2-minute rule wasn't about intensity, it was about consistency. Now let's talk about another powerful way to make habits easy: automation. Think of habits that technology can do for you. Want to save money? Set up an automatic transfer into your savings account every month. Want to eat healthier? Subscribe to a meal delivery service that brings nutritious food straight to your door. When good habits are automated, they stop relying on your willpower. They just happen. And beyond automation, environment tweaks matter. The world around you shapes your choices far more than you realize. For instance, if you keep a water bottle on your desk, you'll naturally drink more. If you keep dumbbells by the couch, you'll naturally do a few curls while watching TV. These aren't big heroic efforts. They're small design choices that make good habits the default option. Here's a reflective question for you. What's one habit you've been struggling with because it feels too big, too overwhelming? How could you shrink it into a 2-minute version? And what's one small tweak you could make in your environment to remove friction and make the habit easy? Remember, habits don't need to be impressive at the start, they just need to be consistent. The third law of behavior change reminds us: if you want to master a habit, don't make it harder. Make it easy, make it simple, make it frictionless. So now we've covered 3 laws: make it obvious, make it attractive, and make it easy. These principles set the stage for action, but there's still one final law that completes the habit loop, because no matter how easy a habit is, if it doesn't feel satisfying, you won't repeat it. That's where we're headed next. In the next chapter, which is about the 4th law, make it satisfying, we'll discover why immediate rewards matter more than distant goals, and how to make your habits stick by making them feel good in the moment. In our last chapter, we explored the power of making habits easy. We saw how friction decides success or failure, how the 2-minute rule lowers resistance, and how automation and environment design can make good choices the default. But there's still one more piece of the puzzle, because here's the truth: no matter how obvious, attractive, or easy a habit is, if it doesn't feel good, it won't last. That's why the final rule of behavior change is so important. Welcome to chapter 6a, make it satisfying. Let's start with a simple reality of human nature: our brains are wired for instant gratification. Thousands of years ago, this wiring kept us alive. If you found food, it made sense to eat it right away. If you found warmth, you stayed near it. Our ancestors didn't have to plan for gym memberships, retirement savings, or daily journaling. They lived in the now, and so do our brains. And that's the challenge with modern habits. The best ones, like saving money, exercising, or learning a skill, usually pay off later, not instantly. Meanwhile, the worst habits, like smoking, binge eating, or scrolling endlessly on social media, reward us immediately. and our brain almost always chooses the short-term win. So how do we flip the script? By finding ways to make good habits satisfying in the moment. Take exercise for example. The long-term reward is fitness and health, but those benefits are months away, so people quit early. But what if you track your workouts on a wall calendar, giving yourself a bright red X every day you show up? Suddenly, the act of marking that X becomes its own reward. The satisfaction is immediate. You're not just building a body, you're building a streak, a chain you don't want to break. James Clear often reminds us of this: what is rewarded is repeated. If you want habits to stick, they must feel good right now, not just later. Here's a powerful story. Comedian Jerry Seinfeld once gave advice to a young writer. He said, write every day, and every day you do mark a big X on your calendar. Soon you'll have a chain of X. Your only job, don't break the chain. That simple visual turned the invisible work of writing into something tangible and satisfying. And the same principle works for any habit, from drinking more water to practicing music to building a business. Another strategy is to literally celebrate small wins. Too often, we dismiss progress because it feels small. I only walked for 10 minutes. I only saved $100. But celebrating these small steps keeps motivation alive. Smile. Give yourself credit, share it with a friend, or simply pause and say, I did it. Each celebration tells your brain this matters, keep going. And here's a metaphor to hold on to. Building habits is like raising a tree. In the early days, when it's just a seedling, growth is invisible. You water it, you nurture it, and it feels like nothing's happening. But each drop of water is a vote, each act of care is progress. And every time you make the habit satisfying, you're giving that tree the sunlight it needs to grow. Practical tools can help too. Habit trackers, journals, or apps turn invisible progress into something you can see and touch. It's like holding a mirror up to your own discipline. When you check off a habit, your brain gets a hit of satisfaction, the same way it feels when you complete a level in a game. And don't underestimate accountability. Sometimes making a habit satisfying means sharing your progress with others. A running buddy, a writing group, or even a simple online log can turn discipline into pride. Humans are social creatures. We love being recognized, and that recognition can be its own reward. So here's a reflection. What's one habit you're building right now that feels good only in the long run? How can you create a reward system that makes it satisfying today? Maybe it's crossing off a streak, maybe it's journaling progress, or maybe it's just a simple, yes, I showed up. Remember, these habits are not just built on effort, they're built on emotion. When you feel good about your behavior, you'll want to repeat it. And repetition is what turns actions into identity. So now we've walked through the 4 laws of behavior change. Make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. Together they form a framework for creating habits that last a lifetime. But we can't stop here, because for every good habit we want to build, there's often a bad habit we need to break. And breaking bad habits requires flipping these very laws upside down. That's exactly what we'll explore next. In Chapter 7, Breaking Bad Habits, the inverse laws will learn how to make the wrong choices invisible, unattractive, difficult, and unsatisfying, so they naturally fade away. In our last chapter, we discovered the 4th and final law of habit building: make it satisfying. We saw how immediate rewards, streaks, and small celebrations give good habits the emotional fuel they need to stick. But here's the reality: while building good habits is essential, breaking bad ones is often the bigger battle. And that's where our journey takes us next. Welcome to Chapter 70, Breaking Bad Habits, the Inverse Laws. The beauty of James Clear's framework is that it works both ways. If the 4 laws of behavior change help you build good habits, their opposites help you dismantle the bad ones. Think of it like flipping a switch. Instead of making habits obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying, we aim to make destructive habits invisible, unattractive, difficult, and unsatisfying. Let's start with the first inversion: make it invisible. Habits live and die by their cues. If you keep cookies on the kitchen counter, you'll eat them. If your phone is buzzing next to your bed, you'll scroll. But if you remove the cues, the habits lose their oxygen. Want to cut down on junk food? Don't buy it in the first place. Want to spend less time online? Delete the app from your home screen. Out of sight, out of mind isn't just a saying, it's a strategy. The second inversion, make it unattractive. This is about reframing how you see the habit. Smoking, for example, might feel like a stress reliever. But what if you consciously reframe it as paying money to damage your lungs and shorten your life? Suddenly the glow fades. Or think about endless social media scrolling. Instead of seeing it as entertainment, see it as energy theft, time stolen from your dreams. By changing the story you attach to a habit, you make it far less appealing. The third inversion, make it difficult. Remember how reducing friction helps good habits thrive? The opposite is true here. Increase the friction. Want to cut down on television? Unplug it after every use and remove the batteries from the remote. Want to stop late night snacking? Store treats in a box on the top shelf. Or better yet, don't keep them at home. Every extra step, every ounce of inconvenience weakens the habit's hold on you. And finally, the fourth inversion, make it unsatisfying. Bad habits survive because they reward you, at least in the short term. To break them, you need to add pain or accountability. Some people use accountability partners. For example, one man trying to quit smoking promised his friend he'd pay 100 every time he lit up. The sting of losing money made cigarettes far less satisfying. Others use habit contracts, written commitments with clear consequences. It may sound extreme, but when the cost of a bad habit outweighs the pleasure, the brain learns quickly to let it go. Let me share a story. A woman struggling with late night snacking tried dozens of diets and failed every time. But when she placed a sticky note on her fridge that said, "Are you really hungry or just bored?" and moved all unhealthy snacks to a locked container in the garage, her behavior changed. She didn't rely on willpower, she simply flipped the laws. By making snacking invisible, unattractive, difficult, and unsatisfying, the habit lost its grip. Or consider the countless stories of people who've beaten addictions. They didn't just quit by sheer force. They redesigned their environments, reframed their beliefs, and created systems of accountability. They didn't fight against their bad habits head on. Instead, they made the bad habits harder to follow and the good habits easier to choose. Here's the truth: your habits are not moral failures or signs of weakness. They are simply loops, cues, cravings, responses, rewards. Break the loop and you break the habit. And the easiest way to break it is not through willpower, but through design. So here's a question for you. What's one bad habit that's been holding you back? Imagine applying the inverse laws to it right now. How can you make it invisible? How can you make it unattractive? How can you make it difficult? And how can you make it unsatisfying? If you reflect honestly and design carefully, you'll find that bad habits don't have to be lifelong battles. They can be dismantled one flipped law at a time. We've now explored both sides of the habit equation, how to build good ones and how to break bad ones. But James Clear doesn't stop there, and neither will we. Because once you've mastered the basics, there are deeper advanced strategies that take you beyond the foundation. Ideas that help you fine-tune habits, unlock greater potential, and truly step into the best version of yourself. That's exactly where we're headed next. In Chapter 80, Advanced Tactics, Going Beyond Basics, we'll explore the hidden techniques and subtle strategies that turn good habits into greatness. In our last chapter, we learned how to dismantle bad habits by flipping the very laws that build good ones, making them invisible, unattractive, difficult, and unsatisfying. That gave us the power to remove what holds us back. But now comes the exciting part: how do we go beyond just fixing our habits and truly master them? How do we take our growth to a level where habits are no longer something we force, but something that flows naturally? That's where James Clear's advanced tactics come in. Welcome to Chapter 80, Advanced Tactics Going Beyond Basics. Let's begin with the idea of identity-based habits. At the beginner level, people focus on results. I want to lose 10 pounds. At the intermediate level, they focus on processes. I'll work out 3 times a week. But at the advanced level, the focus shifts to identity. I am the type of person who doesn't miss workouts. Think about it. A smoker who's trying to quit might say, "No thanks, I'm trying to quit." That still sounds like someone who is a smoker, just fighting against it. But another person might say, "No thanks, I'm not a smoker." That's identity. It's not about effort anymore, it's about who you are. And this is where habits truly scale, because once a behavior becomes tied to your identity, you don't need motivation, it becomes natural. You don't have to remind yourself to brush your teeth, it's just part of who you are. In the same way, if you start seeing yourself as a reader, you'll naturally pick up books. If you see yourself as a runner, you'll naturally lace up your shoes. The goal isn't just to do the habit, it's to become the kind of person who lives that habit. Now let's talk about the role of the environment and community. We often imagine ourselves as strong individuals, but the truth is, we're shaped deeply by the world and people around us. If you spend time with friends who prioritize health, you'll likely eat better and exercise more. If your community values learning, you'll naturally grow intellectually. On the flip side, if everyone around you stays stuck in negative cycles, it becomes harder to rise above. James Clear puts it beautifully: we don't rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our systems. And one of the strongest systems we can design is the company we keep. There's an old saying, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. If you want to build better habits, surround yourself with people who embody those habits. Join a running group, a book club, and a mastermind circle, even virtually through podcasts or online communities. You can immerse yourself in environments where the habits you desire are the default. And here's a story to illustrate this. A young man who struggled with fitness for years suddenly transformed after joining a CrossFit gym. The workouts were tough, but it wasn't just about exercise, it was about community. He didn't want to miss sessions, not because of discipline, but because his friends expected him. That's the power of social reinforcement. Habits stick best when they're shared. Finally, let's explore the Goldilocks rule. Remember the story of Goldilocks. Not too hot, not too cold, but just right. Habits work the same way. If something is too easy, you get bored. If it's too hard, you get discouraged. The sweet spot of growth lies in the middle, just challenging enough to keep you engaged, but not so overwhelming that you give up. Think about a video game. You wouldn't play if every level was impossible, but you also wouldn't stay interested if every level was trivial. The fun comes from being pushed just slightly beyond your current skill. The same applies to learning guitar, writing daily, or running marathons. Stay in the zone where effort meets progress, and you'll keep moving forward. This is why mastery is not about intensity, but consistency at the right level of challenge. If you can align your habits with your identity, anchor them in the right environment, and keep them balanced in the Goldilocks zone, you'll not just build habits, you'll build a lifestyle. So let me ask you this: who do you want to become? What environments will pull you forward instead of holding you back? And are your current habits in that sweet spot where growth feels both challenging and exciting? As we close this chapter, remember, going beyond basics isn't about doing more, it's about doing smarter. It's about aligning habits with your deepest identity, surrounding yourself with the right influences, and finding joy in the process of steady, sustainable growth. But there's still one final layer to explore, because habits don't just change you, they ripple outward, shaping your relationships, your work, and even the culture around you. And that's where we'll go next. In Chapter 9e, The Ripple Effect of Habits, we'll uncover how small, personal changes can create waves of transformation far beyond yourself. In our last chapter, we went beyond the basics. We saw how identity shapes behavior, how environment and community reinforce habits, and how the Goldilocks rule keeps us in the sweet spot of growth. But there's something even bigger at play, because habits aren't just about you. They don't just live inside your daily routines. They ripple outward, touching every corner of your life and even the lives of those around you. Welcome to Chapter 9, The Ripple Effect of Habits. Let's begin with the idea of keystone habits. A keystone in architecture is the central stone that holds an entire arch together. In the same way, keystone habits are those small shifts that trigger positive change in multiple areas of your life. Take exercise as an example. People who start working out regularly don't just get fitter. Research shows they also tend to eat healthier, sleep better, and even become more productive at work. Why? Because one good habit often sparks another. That's the ripple effect. One stone drops into the pond, and suddenly the waves spread everywhere. Or think about something as simple as making your bed each morning. At first glance, it seems trivial, but Admiral William McRaven, a US Navy SEAL, once said that making your bed starts your day with a win. It gives you a sense of order, pride, and momentum. That tiny action sets the tone for everything that follows. Now let's talk about how habits influence not just your routines, but your relationships, work, and health. Consider relationships. A small habit like saying thank you regularly or sending a quick text to check in on a loved one might not seem groundbreaking, but over months and years, those tiny signals of care compound into trust, intimacy, and stronger bonds. Habits aren't just personal, they're relational. In the workplace, it's the same. A leader who makes a habit of listening deeply creates a culture of respect. A team that begins every meeting with a quick review of wins builds morale and momentum. These aren't massive shifts, they're small, repeatable actions that quietly shape the culture of an entire organization. And of course, health. A habit as small as drinking one extra glass of water a day or taking a short evening walk may not feel transformative. But stack those actions over time, and they can reduce stress, improve energy, and lower the risk of disease. Again, the ripple spreads further than you first imagined. This brings us to the heart of the ripple effect, compounding. You've heard the phrase compound interest in finance, the idea that small deposits left to grow eventually create exponential returns. Habits work exactly the same way. James Clear gives us this striking example. If you can get just 1% better every day, it may feel invisible at first. After all, what's the difference between today and tomorrow? But over the course of a year, those tiny improvements don't add up, they multiply. By the end of the year, you're 37 times better than when you started. Think about that, 37 times. That's the power of compounding habits. What feels like nothing in the moment becomes extraordinary in the long run. Here's a story to bring it to life. Picture two friends who start at the same point. One decides to read 10 pages of a book every night. The other decides to scroll social media for the same 10 minutes. After a week, the difference is negligible. After a month, still subtle. But after a year, one has read nearly a dozen books while the other has consumed thousands of fleeting posts. Same minutes spent, completely different future shaped. That's the ripple effect in action. So I invite you to pause and reflect. What tiny ripple are you starting today? Is it a habit that builds health, connection, knowledge, or discipline? Or is it one that quietly drains your energy and pulls you away from your goals? Because every action is a vote, not just for your identity, but for the direction your life will ripple toward. And here's the beautiful part, you don't need to chase perfection. You only need to plant the right habits and let them grow. Like seeds, they may seem small, almost invisible in the beginning, but given time they branch out, take root, and shape entire forests of change. We've now seen how habits go beyond the self. They are not isolated routines, they are forces that ripple into our families, our careers, our communities, and ultimately our destiny. And that brings us to the final chapter of our journey, a conclusion that ties it all together, the essence of why small habits truly lead to massive results. In the next chapter, we'll reflect on everything we've learned and discover how the smallest steps can create the biggest transformations. We've journeyed through all the major ideas together, from the power of tiny actions to the science of behavior change to the ripple effect that habits create in every corner of life. In the last chapter, we saw how one small shift can ripple outward, transforming health, relationships, work, and beyond. Now it's time to step back and bring it all together. Welcome to our conclusion, Tiny Habits, Massive Results. Let's quickly revisit the core lessons. James Clear gave us a framework, 4 simple laws of behavior change. Each one is like a compass point guiding us to build better habits and break destructive ones. Law 1, make it obvious. If you want to create a habit, it has to start with clarity. You can't act on what you don't see. That's why we talked about cues, putting your book on the pillow if you want to read at night, or placing your water bottle on your desk if you want to stay hydrated. Visibility fuels consistency. Law 2, make it attractive. We humans are wired for pleasure. Habits that feel enjoyable stick. That's why dopamine, rewards, and temptation bundling are so powerful. Pairing a workout with your favorite playlist, or combining chores with your favorite podcast turns effort into enjoyment, attraction turns discipline into desire, law 30 make it easy, friction decides the fate of habits. If it feels hard, you'll resist it, but if it feels effortless, you'll repeat it. The 2-minute rule reminded us that every habit can start small, as tiny as putting on your shoes, writing one sentence, or meditating for a breath. Because once you start, momentum carries you forward. Simplicity is strength, law 4A make it satisfying. Our brains love instant gratification. That's why tracking streaks, celebrating small wins, and rewarding progress matter so much. Habits survive when they feel good in the moment. Satisfaction isn't indulgence, it's fuel. It keeps the fire alive. And then, when we turned these laws upside down, we found the secret to breaking bad habits, make them invisible, unattractive, difficult, and unsatisfying. The same compass that points you toward growth can also steer you away from what holds you back. But the heart of this book and the heart of our journey is this: change doesn't require massive leaps, it requires small, consistent steps. The magic is in the compounding effect, just 1% better every day, just one tiny ripple that grows into a wave. So here's my invitation to you: don't wait for the perfect time, don't set 100 goals at once. Instead, pick one. Just one small habit that matters to you. Maybe it's journaling a single line each night. Maybe it's drinking a glass of water when you wake up. Maybe it's pausing to say thank you once a day. Choose it, commit to it, and let it grow. Because here's the truth: success is not a single event. It's not luck or genius or willpower. It's the daily vote you cast with your actions. Every habit you build is a brick laid in the foundation of your future self. So ask yourself, who do I want to become? Then let your habits answer for you. Remember, habits shape identity, and identity reinforces habits. You don't just run, you become a runner. You don't just write, you become a writer. You don't just learn, you become a lifelong learner. Every repetition is a vote for the person you're becoming. So as we close this journey through atomic habits, I want you to pause, reflect. What's your one small habit? Share it, write it down, tell a friend, and if you'd like, share it with this community. Because habits grow stronger when they live not just inside us, but around us, supported by others. And of course, if you found this journey valuable, subscribe for more wisdom distilled from the world's best books. This is just one story. There are countless others waiting to guide you. This was Vikram, your Briefler from Briefly, bringing you life-changing lessons in minutes. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing.